Good morning.
Morning, Dan.
You okay?
I'm good.
Yes.
Fresh-faced.
Welcome back.
I like your jacket.
Thank you, mate.
Thank
you.
Is that another
For the cool look.
wife purchase? Not yourself.
I don't dress myself.
You don't shop.
I don't. Everything you see is bought for me. But yeah, you all good?
Yes.
Summer holidays starting.
Summer holidays starting soon.
Yeah,
it's countdown. My son's looking forward to it. He's ready. He's ready for the break.
Well, mine are not there yet. My little one starts in September, so I don't have to.
Shaw's is a holiday all the time, isn't it?
It is all
full-time
the time.
holiday.
Today's guest. Good morning, Warren.
Good morning.
Thanks
Warren.
for joining us. Today we're going to talk about life as a CEO.
Oh, crikey.
What an episode that is. I was really looking forward to this. It was something that you've been on the radar for a little bit. I'm like, let's get Warren in. And we're just going to talk about life, in your job, what you do, talk about Nexus and talk about the school, the trust and everything like that. Just have a nice open conversation, really.
As we do.
As we do.
Start slowly into it.
Very chilled out. But as always with our episodes, if we want to start with an introduction, who you are and where you're from.
It's like being on blind date.
That's exactly it.
So I'm Warren Carratt, Chief Exec at Nexus Multi Academy Trust, which is a I suppose medium-large size multi-academy trust across South Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire. So we've been going since 2016. We're 17 schools at the minute, 16 of them special or hospital schools, one mainstream primary. Just growing over the next 6 to 12 months to 24, 25 schools. So an exciting time for us. And we're also openly consulting on merger with another similar-sized MAT at this time. I was appointed in late 2015, so I'm somewhat of a heretic in that I've not come through the head teacher route. So many years ago, I was a classroom support worker, we were called. Right. No teaching, but a CSW in one of our founding schools, Hilltop. So a TA as would be now in a special school. And then I ended up finding my way through the NHS, local government, and in 2015 were appointed to this post following national advert to found the trust. So almost 10 years.
As CEO?
As CEO, yeah.
Oh, so was it the 10-year anniversary this year then?
So, you talk it up, don't you? I'm in my 10th year. But yeah, the trust anniversary will be the 1st of June 2026 when that's our 10th anniversary.
Wow. That's incredible.
Seems a long time, but academisation seems still very, very new.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you must have been one of the first, or in what was it, around 2012? The first, I can't remember what the first academised.
So our local school, I'm from Maltby in Rotherham, born there, lived there, will likely be buried there. It's a bit like Royston Vasey, you never leave. Maltby Academy were one of the original Blairite academies. Right. So obviously, the one thing about the Academy's programme, which I think often gets misconstrued, because it was so dogmatically implemented by Gove during the coalition period, is that it has had the support of the three major political parties, and our local secondary were transformed by the Labour Academy's programme. But yeah, I think we coming on board in 2016, certainly I think we were later to the party, but the appointment of the chief executive of this post, I think I were one of the only ones who'd been appointed through national advert as what's called a first generation CEO. So typically and understandably, the Govian model was we need super heads to become super chief executives to save schools. And that's where a lot of my peers have come from or come through that route. So what we're different, I think.
Yeah. Obviously your journey in was quite short with school. You were involved with all, you see a lot of people coming in, they go through being a teacher, being a head teacher and all that. So you obviously brought quite a lot of leadership qualities with you. So what was your roles before this then that led you into this role? So
my if I have a professional qualification in anything, I'm CIPD, so I'm HR qualified, but I've never worked in HR. So my background were organisational development in the NHS. I worked at a PCT, a primary care trust. This is 8 or 9 iterations of the health service ago. And then I worked for the National Blood Service, or NHS Blood and Transplant as it's known, in a national role for a couple of years, which were fascinating to get to grips with, really established bureaucracies that operate both locally with a PCT and nationally for the blood service. That had just been through, interestingly, its own merger, where 2 other organisations politicians had come together with the Blood Service to create a new national body, and I were part of a team that were looking at post-merger integration into a new corporate identity. And then probably the most significant work experience I had leading up to this role were I was a head of service in children's social care for 8 years in local government, which were fascinating because I started in 2009, so very much the twilight of the new Labour period of government. And we can all remember what 2010 brought in terms of austerity, and particularly for local authorities. But the local authority I worked in at the time had been put into a category by Ofsted. It had failed an inspection. There were real crises in terms of social work recruitment and retention. And I were appointed as part of a team, or other heads of service, to address that and turn it around, which we did. But working in children's social care at that time meant that as people left, you got asked to take on more and more responsibility. So I went in as a workforce development lead. By the time that I left, I had responsibility for workforce development, early help services, and the local Safeguarding Children partnership. So my involvement in local government meant that I were exposed to the ecosystem that schools either thrive or fail in, which were quite helpful. And I think special schools in particular are incredibly interdependent on local authority commissioners. And local authorities don't typically commission effectively or strategically. So one of the reasons why the incoming board of directors chose to advertise and appoint somebody like me from outside the teaching profession is because what they felt is that there was a distinct separation between school leadership and trust leadership.
Yeah.
And they wanted trust leadership to focus on filling the gap that commissioners had left or created. But, you know, at that point, 6 years of austerity had left local government in a real mess. And I think that gap has been filled reasonably comfortable by our trust.
With the, you'll know a bit about this. Obviously, as
Don't put me on the spot.
I'm putting
Do
you on the
not
spot.
put
I
me on the
always
spot.
put him on the spot. She's worked with schools a long time. You understand that when they became an academise, you get different leaders from different backgrounds with different visions. And now what we have, 10 years, 15 years on, is schools going in different directions. Some running really quickly, some doing amazing stuff, and some can't even get out the blocks.
Yeah.
And obviously speaking to past guests, whether it's Johnny and like some come with amazing kind of vision, and I guess you need that as a leader and a CEO. It's not all about, like you say, it's not all about the education. It's actually just part of it, which is crazy as a CEO of an education establishment. But it's just a small part, isn't it?
I think it's really hard for a teacher-backed head teacher to take on or sort of evolve into this leadership role. That's all encompassing, because they're so I suppose industrialised to like the way that things have been ran and controlled by the local authority. To actually step out of that mode, I suppose it's like being in the army, isn't it? And you're drilled every day of like curriculum. This is what standards are, things, and actually when someone comes out of the services and to civilization, they're probably like, whoa, what? I'm not used to this sort of thing. So actually, it must be really difficult. So for the ones that have gone through that and then still take that leadership on, it's a massive personal win for them, isn't it, really? Whereas I suppose like in your circumstance and others where they've had a different background and brought a different leadership style or a different output, it's not necessarily easier, but it's probably not as as a challenge to step out of that and actually be yourself. Whereas that's one thing I've found, and you can see the differences. I must admit, you can see what's more important to one person is totally different to the other. So it's nice to have a mixture of both, but it's really nice to have the outside view in, like yourself.
Oh, it is.
That. Because you used to get that sort of understanding, that commerciality sometimes, and that's where I think academies do thrive, is where they look at it as a commercial entity, and not just, it's a sort of, it's our little school, it's all localised. This is not. This is, for it to thrive, it's got to really go forward with what needs to be done.
Yeah, which then comes on to your obviously how you lead then, really. You must do a lot on leadership, do you? Do you do a lot of kind of self-development on leadership and understanding how to...
You love leadership,
teams.
don't you?
I love leadership. I'm putting you right on the spot here.
No.
But how do you get your team ticking then? Because I'll be honest, I hear great stuff, which is great, isn't it? You hear good people and you've got a great team, and speaking to staff, I've spoken to your teams and they're like, we've got a great thing going on. And listening to even speaking to Lana about adding things like social value into your projects, like you're so far ahead of some that can't even get windows put in the school because they've got no money.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what's going on here? So going back to your leadership is, without putting you on the spot here, do you implement some things that you allow your team to thrive and be better?
I'm shifting because it always. I think one of the problems we have in education is there's quite a lot of self-referencing discourse about leadership and what it is to be a great leader. And I'm a big believer in servant leadership, but I'm also a big believer in nudge theory. I think the great thing about nudge theory. So when I came into schools, my view was, right, what do the very best teachers do in order for me to acclimatise to this culture? What are we about? And the very best teachers allow children. Apologies for the jargon here, but they're generators of self-actualization. So what we want is every child to be the best that they can be. And, some children might need a little bit more guidance and a few more nudges along that way. But, when kids get their GCSE results or A-level results, we have schools that have got Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5. The leaders of those schools are really proud for those children. Not proud of themselves for what they've achieved, but are proud of the children for what they've achieved in a self-actualized way. And in many ways, that it always felt like, well, that's quite easy then. So, a little bit like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, is when I came into this post, my view was, well, the approach, therefore, is let's not be prescriptive about what we do, but let's try and create the conditions where people can make mistakes. But my job and the job of our leadership group is to help people to be the best that they can be through self-actualization. So there's a high cost to that. It means that you make mistakes and you don't come down on people like a ton of bricks. So, people have different leadership styles. I've never shouted at another human being in my life other than my own children. And even then, I feel really guilty when I do that. Because who the hell am I to shout at another member of staff? So, this idea that, well, I brought them in and rollocked them, I don't believe that I wouldn't respond well to that. What I respond well to is being given agency, being given trust, and if I get it wrong, being held to account for getting it wrong. And if it's deliberate and it's negligent, I've got a problem. But if I've tried my best and it's failed, but it were an effort to try and do my best on that path to self-actualization as a person, I'd like to think that could be looked at reasonably and supportively. And that's how I've always approached line management, whether in local government or in this role. I think when we were talking, you were just saying, weren't you, about teachers and head teachers coming into the role of CEO. The very best CEOs, regardless of background, recognise what the limitations are on them and bring the right people in to lead areas of business. So, I know a number of CEOs now, and the very best ones, a lot of them have either a chief operations officer or a post akin to that, because what they recognise is this isn't my skill set, this isn't my area of expertise, and I need to trust somebody and give somebody agency to be able to do that for this organisation, and that's what works really, really well. And if anything, I've always been quite clear on that. So we don't need a chief operations officer because that's what I bring. Yeah. I understand bureaucracy, I understand administration. And I think what I understand, and my colleagues may say differently, but I think I understand, the intrinsic elements of what it means to have an open culture. So you have to have a high threshold for difference and diversity. You have to have a high threshold for people getting things wrong and understanding. You can't be reactive. You have to avoid all the behaviours that drive you to disguised compliance. And my 8 years in social care, when every time we have a child death in this country and it hits the headlines, a consistent characteristic is disguised compliance from families. People lie. People present agencies with the truth that they want to see and hear. And it's false. And I've brought that into education, into leadership, is we have to therefore create the conditions where people are unfilteredly honest, which means that more often than not, people say things to me that I'd rather they didn't, and you carry that at home and you feel bad about it and you think, but, at least we know exactly where we are. So I think there's, that the cultural aspect to leadership, where you create the conditions where people feel they can be open, honest, where they can fail and where they work hard. Now, you have high expectations, but you have compassion and kindness. And too often, kindness is seen as weakness, and it's not, it's an enabler. But I'm waffling, I will stop in a sec. I think our conditions are, in terms of our strategy and approach, so our conditions are cultural. Our strategy and approach, my view has always been, the trust role is to enable and facilitate. So where we have trusts that centralise everything and direct, you create a single point of failure. You create a multiple school system that is built around the vision of one or two people. And I can't think of anything more disastrous than that.
It's really interesting. It is interesting.
Isn't it? It's playing
Isn't it? Yeah, because I always thought it was a good thing.
of centralising.
Put it together.
Yeah.
But then it's one person or two saying we're
Or
going to lead
system.
all this.
Yeah.
When actually, it's a...
Let them lead.
Let them lead. Yeah.
Do you know what I took out of that was interesting, that what you said about like actually kindness isn't a sort of I can't remember the exact words that you said there,
Weakness.
but really a weakness, yeah, because I beat myself up about thinking, I'm too kind, I should be like a bit firmer, but actually, like you say, it does give people that sort of space to look at what they've done and work let them make some choices and not just be that sort of hard-faced corporate entity that you sort of associate with. And
totally
but I do beat myself and think, oh gosh, I'm too soft.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a British thing or a
Do you know what though? It got you this far, hasn't it? Like I've
nice,
never shouted at
yeah.
anyone.
It's been amazing.
I don't think I could.
We've got well far been nice.
Honestly,
haven't we,
I'm too
really?
nice.
Really
I'd be
far.
an amazing CEO of a school, mate, honestly. I think that might be my next role, actually, if I look for one. Because I couldn't shout at anyone. I'm very much like that. Like, just like, everyone will find their own way. They find their own path. As long as they're to support them on it, they're going to fall off. You just nudge them back on.
Absolutely.
And keep them on their journey. So I love that leadership model. But just going back to that centralisation thing. No, it's good. It's really kind of made me think, like, this is why we've got so many different schools doing so well and some not doing so well. I mean, we're not calling anybody out in this space, but unfortunately, the education system is there as kind of a framework, and then you can do what you want around it in your own trust, can't you?
Yeah.
But you've done 10 years now as this leader, as being there and fronting it. Do you ever look and think there's people coming through that could do what I'm really putting you on the spot today, but do you look around and think, bring people in from within that could lead and take this establishment on? Not trying to get you out of a job or out, Warren, but...
It sounds like that, Dan.
Retirement is starting ticking away there. Yeah.
I didn't realise this were an exit interview.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But do you ever look within and think, wow, they're amazing. We're either going to lose them to somebody else or we've got to bring them through.
Oh, absolutely. And Lana Stoyles, who's been on, is a classic example. So, Lana went through a selection process. I know she won't mind me talking about this.
She said it on her interview. She said it on here. It was amazing, to be fair.
But what we recognised at that interview, what I saw, what the assistant chief exec on the panel with me saw, is somebody who wasn't right for that post, but just seemed like a really impressive human being with all the qualities that you want and that we want and need to be able to work in our system and model. So much of what we do well is about behavioural. And again, I'm a CIPD member, but my HR colleagues will probably be cringing and getting quite cross when I say this next part. When we assess, I'm far more interested in who is the person than what is the skills and knowledge they've got. We get the skills and knowledge from an application form. You can get that from the career history. But who are they and how do they operate? Lana came into a post that we created because we felt that she offered us something and it were a unique opportunity of coming together. Lana has since had, I think, 3 or 4 re-designations of her post, and she's now an executive director for business transformation. And my view has always been, if you've got somebody who's good, pay them what you would pay them if you were advertising that post right now. Which, again, I think is interesting. There's a cultural issue in some schools that the only posts that are worth paying more money for are qualified teacher posts, and we don't see that across the majority of maths, but there is in my experience as a school governor 10-15 years ago, there were elitism in the sense that, well, teachers are paid this, support staff can't possibly be anywhere near that. And actually, I mean, I'd be a hypocrite if I were to dogmatically pursue that line. But what we've done with Lana throughout the course of her time with us is her role has been revised based on what she's proven she can do and what our organisational needs are. And the two are intrinsically linked. Now, if I were to leave Nexus Matt tomorrow, I've always seen it as my responsibility to make sure that the board of directors have got options and choices. And there are at least 3 or 4 other people who could competently and consistently step into my role on an interim basis and lead the trust. What I also feel really strongly about, though, and the reason I don't have a deputy CEO, is because at the point when I leave, whenever that is, if that's through my choice or somebody else's, the board of directors, who are the responsible governors for the trust, will need to take a decision about what they want the future leadership of the trust to look like. So I think my responsibility is absolutely to make sure that we've got options and choices, and that we've got people who would feel confident and comfortable stepping up if they were asked to, but that people weren't tied to a succession plan that is not mine to create.
Yeah. It's a fair answer.
I think, yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, it's in football management, I know we keep going back to it, but it's like, the assistant manager doesn't become the manager just because he's the assistant manager, is he? So I say it's that, actually, which way are we going? What's the vision? And so it's a nice underline, isn't it?
Yeah, and that long-term vision is important, is it? You talking football, it's a perfect example. I'm a massive Newcastle fan, so we can talk about them. We've got Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall, and Jason Tyndall is literally he's seeing it come together amazing. His best teacher is Eddie Howe. You know, we're fearful that he's raw, but Newcastle will have an amazing plan, and it's not about pushing people back down to say get back into your lane. And I think that's great leadership. Is that it's understanding that you're only part of a journey. You're not the journey. You're just part of it, and you know, I think that's where strong leadership. Whereas some come in, it's almost like, no, this is it. It's my vision only.
It's already prepped.
And unfortunately, when it does come to an end, there's nothing left. It needs to be rebuilt again.
And I mean, that's, again, what's important to you in leadership. So I am genuinely would be appalled if, you know, when I leave, at the point where I leave Nexus, 6 months later, 12 months later, if I bump into somebody in the street and they said, oh, things have collapsed. Because there couldn't be a greater statement of failure for my leadership in my time there. If the public authority that I'm responsible for, and again, you know, I incorporated Nexus, I submitted the documentation, I was the first chief exec. The trust is not mine. And I don't know if Lana shared this, but I have two pet hates, really. One pet hate that manifests in two words, my and I. It's ours and it's we. That's how we speak about it. So Nexus, nobody will hear me say my trust, my schools, my staff. They're ours. I'm a custodian of public service. And you've got to build a system. And this is the difference, isn't it, between institutional management at a school level, as I see it, although schools are mini systems in their own right. But trusts, bureaucracies, their administrations, the systems. And you've got to build a system that is sustainable beyond your personage. And if you don't do that, you've failed.
Yeah. Love it. So just for the record, Warren isn't leaving Nexus Multi.
Just building.
There you go. We'll keep you on.
Is that exclusive?
But it's just really important, you know. Sometimes people don't speak their mind about this stuff, you know. So I really appreciate that you have spoken openly about that. Just talk to us about the trust then, in general. When you joined, how many schools was there?
So we founded it with 3 schools. Three. 2 special schools who had a good grading, and 1 special school that was inadequate, so sponsored, and a bit bonkers to let a trust that's never come into existence take an inadequate school. But ironically, that inadequate school had an inspection pre-conversion a month before we created the trust, and they got good. But we took the approach before conversion that it were 3 equal partners coming together to create something in parity. So they were parity esteem. And
then 10 years on, what are we up to now, would you say?
So 17 currently in the trust, across South Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire, with a few more in the process of joining us. So we think 24, 25 by this time next year.
It's big growth. How do you, when a new one joins, does the strategy change? Or does the strategy always in place? Is it just about giving them extra support? What's that process look like from a new school joining, like internally? Yeah,
it's changed, and we've tightened a lot up over the last 10 years. So, you know, I'm not embarrassed to say that when I first started, my view was, well, how complex can this be? The schools, they've existed for years. You know, they've been there. Kids attend them. Yeah. What's the possible risk? And then, you know, you find that the asbestos register is not up to date, or you've got leaking roofs, or pools that don't work, or so we've certainly we've tightened up our procedures. But what I always say, and it's true, is when a new school joins us, the first thing to change is the trust, in the sense that it doesn't require massive systemic change of the trust, but our makeup, the communities we serve. I said servant leadership earlier on, and that is different for every school, manifestly through our relationship with the head teacher and sometimes governing boards. But special schools tend to have quite small governing bodies anyway. It's very different to mainstream primary, because they're in a community, but they're not of that community. So a special school, we've got one in Maltby, where I live, but that services the needs across for children from across Rotherham, Doncaster and Sheffield. So you don't have that same community connection in the same way. So it tends to be with and through the head teacher. What we've tried to do over the last few years is, again, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about your growth and the scalability. And we've always, I saw myself in the early days as the system architect. So how do you build something that can withstand the demands of growth if it's relationship based? So we've got a very large central trust team. I don't know if you've seen it, but we've got about 70 people in our central trust team, which for a trust of 17 schools looks on paper probably excessive to some.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But continue.
But it's very affordable. We have we're finishing with a surplus at the end of this year. We've been very good on financial health, and I think the reason why it's affordable and it works is because we've allocated and prioritised resource in all the right places. But the focus for individuals who are appointed is what we're talking earlier on about behaviours and relationships, is everything hinges on relationships. So you need to have people who can have the time and capacity to foster, develop and improve relationships with head teachers as the schools join us. So 3 years ago, we changed the model. I line managed all head teachers. I think we were at 11 schools. And we brought in an executive regional director layer to manage head teachers. Now, the board and directors and myself had a conversation about the pros and cons of bringing in 2 or 3 of them at that time, because we really only needed 1. Well, my view was, look, this is a pivotal post. This manages the relationship. I think we need to bring in 2 because we need to front load capacity. And that's what we've consistently done over time. So by the time that our exec regional directors have acclimatised to the trust, our way of working, we know them, they know us, we're ready to be able to start working in partnership with new schools that are joining us. So I think it is about, and again, I understand that there are some trusts who have the financial restrictions that mean this isn't possible, but we've never been dependent on TCAF or DFE grants to be able to invest in capacity and resource. We've mapped it out strategically in right way. What do we want it to look like in 2 years' time? And how do we put this infrastructure in place now so that when it looks like that in 2 years' time, it's seamless? Does that make sense?
It totally does. It's growth of a business, isn't it? That's all it is. It's like taking on 25 new staff, and it's like, how do we manage them? And usually, if the systems are not in place, it can collapse really quickly.
Absolutely.
So you're always ahead then. You're always planning ahead. The reason I ask that is because it blows my mind sometimes that you've got a trust with sometimes 20, 30 schools within it, and their central team's like 3.
Yeah.
Their estates team's 1. And I'm thinking, right,
no comment.
How's Lana then got all these staff for these many schools, and they've got that, and that's when that whole picture comes. It's what's going on. Different leadership models are actually pulling a lot of school, a lot of academies back, I guess, and trusts.
There's a lot of fear there, isn't there? Like the revenue
correct,
streams.
it's the fear, isn't it, of getting it wrong. And what happens if you overload it on the basis of I'll bring X in, and then it collapses? So how do you navigate past that? Because there has to be that risk of, I know when you take schools on, it's pupil, isn't it? You pay per pupil. You've got falling pupil numbers. So that's like, what we're going to do?
Well, we're the opposite in special, but yeah.
Opposite in special. And maybe, is that then what the key part is then with special, that you're actually able to get ahead?
In part, I mean, we've not, so our special schools, we walk a tightrope. We have in-year surpluses because we work really hard. And, the bottom line is right now, whether I like it or not, whether we like it or not, demand for specialist provision massively outstrips supply. So when you look at supply-demand factors, we have got what local authorities have not got enough of. So it is the opposite issue to what mainstream primary are wrestling with right now. And I completely understand the government's view to try and reduce that demand, and I agree with it, but the legislative framework we're in means that will be very difficult to unpick. I think for me that the different MAP models ultimately come back to the ecosystem, the political ecosystem we live in. So the academies, the academisation, the academies policy, the whole agenda, as far as I can see, is the only major public sector reform that has been optional, which I think is absolutely mad. We don't give the NHS the choice about whether or not it's going to change. We've not said to clinical commissioning groups, would you like to be an ICB? Whitehall, determine, change. Back under the coalition when we did the big reforms to probation, we separated National Probation Service out to community rehabilitation companies. We've since come back together. Wasn't a choice. They didn't say, would you like to do this? But when it comes to academisation, if you're a good or better school, It's your choice.
Yeah.
And that breeds a really interesting dynamic because if you were a head teacher of a maintained school and your proxy boss was a lay chair of governors who, you meet with probably once a half term and you attend termly governing body meetings. And the alternative is that you go into a structure where you've got a line manager who will hold you to account on a day-to-day basis, who will have control over your budget and legally have control over your resources. How many turkeys would vote for Christmas? Yeah, so I think what a lot of trust CEOs have had to do, understandably, what we've all had to do is try and find a way to balance what our legal responsibilities are, what our ethical responsibilities are for the public money we've got, and how we help move schools forward in a way that is in their interests, but also at a point in time for new schools who may or may not want to join you when there's zero trust and the one thing they fear more than anything else is change.
Yeah.
So, where trusts have got smaller central teams, I suspect it's because that was the commitment that the trust gave to schools at that time. We'll come together. This is a safe place where we don't want anything to change, and we understand that. And I absolutely agree with that. What I would say is that if you track back through Nexus' central team, I think we exploded in terms of our central resource about 4 years ago. Because what we have is we have the services we fund from our partnership fee, the top slice, which is 5%, and it has been 5% all the way through. But there's probably about 40% of the central team who are bought back from our schools because heads choose to buy that back,
right.
Which is a really unusual model in the sense that it is at odds with where the accountability sits. But we are a provider to the schools that we are accountable for. And it's a delegated budget decision, and heads have chosen to do that. But that's I suppose, the fruit that you ultimately yield from years of toil to build trust and understanding. And we continue with that model now. So we've got schools joining us at the minute who are saying, well, what if we don't want to have this? And the view is, well, then you don't have to have it. It's your choice. But over time, what we find is once trust gets established and head teachers are open to working with us in a natural, normalised environment. So within the first 12 months, probably 12 months plus a post-conversion, at that point, there's no mistrust, there's no scepticism, there's an understanding about why this is something that they want to be part of. And that's the way that we've played it. Other trusts do it differently.
You're there for support.
Absolutely.
Not to dictate.
Absolutely.
I love that. Because then 12 months, like, they're always there.
Yeah.
And they're not actually telling us what to do. Yeah. Shall we use them? And naturally then you get this trust together.
Yeah.
I like that. I do like that. It's just really important. I think it's just thrown me all these years of dealing with different schools. And, 1 minute it's like, we can't even get our windows changed. And now it's like, we're just dumping in £4 million into all these refurbs. And I'm thinking, hang on, it just isn't adding up in my head. You've got the same amount of schools, the pupils are the same.
I think you've got to look at this a little bit laterally though, because, and a lot of, we'll say, streamlined sort of like schools, non-specialist schools, they'll say, well, actually, like I said, the demand for SEM provision is increasing at such an incredible rate, and the drop-off in numbers on the other side is so much. There is going to be an imbalance in where funding gets, implemented, should we say. So you'll have the one, probably the sort of back office other CEOs or teachers saying, well, they're getting this funding, or we're struggling in this end to try and manage it. But so it is, do you find that's made it easier because of the demand? Because like anything, it's supply and demand, isn't it? It's called you to action more so than if you were a standard sort of, I say standard, I mean like just a normal sort of school setting because of that demand.
Yes and no. So the commissioning arrangements as such, I won't get into it because it'll bore you. It'll definitely bore anybody listening.
I don't know enough about it, so I'm quite interested.
Well, I think part of the challenge is nobody does. That's the interesting thing, is that it feels like it's the biggest kept secret in terms of state education. The local authorities commission special school places, so we are not in control of our admissions. So a local authority can consult with us. Yeah, it's madness. So local authorities consult with us over whether or not we can meet the needs of a child, and a head teacher can say no, we can't, and the local authority can still name that same school on an EHCP, and from the minute we're named, we've got a legal responsibility for a child. So our context in special is that the budget that funds specialist provision, the high needs block, cumulatively across the country, across England, is overspent by 5.1 billion. So that's local authorities with £5.1 billion worth of overspend.
Mental.
And the DFE, don't know what to do about that. So what they do is they haul local authorities over the coals about it. The DfE's guidance does two things. One, it says local authorities need to plan for how many specialist places they need. Yeah. If local authorities want to place a child in a special school above a planned place, so they get reviewed annually and updated annually, but if they want to place a child in a special school above the agreed planned place number, they can legally withhold a huge amount of the funding for the first 12 months. So we have what's called place funding in special schools, £10,000 per child. If the local authorities say that, let's say in every school, we want 150 places from that school, even if they've got 160 places there already, then they can say we only want 150. And they can continue to place in that school and withhold that £10,000 per place. Right. And they can also determine how much additional funding they give you in terms of top-up. So they can vary that. That's down to them. And special schools, by the DfE's own statutory guidance, cannot refuse a placement on the grounds of funding. Now, you tell me anywhere else, in any sector, where a commissioner has got the unilateral power to determine your capacity as a provider and then to determine what funding they're going to give you.
That's
so
insane.
It is. And what we therefore have to work really hard on, the reason why, again, somebody with my background was appointed this post, is we have to work really hard with local authorities to explain to them why not going down the short-changing route is in the interest of children and families. Yeah. But the department's view is, you don't have to do that and you're already overspent, so maybe you should save that £10,000 per child and not pass it on. Now, the alternative is that you then end up with a state special system in free fall, and we've increased spend in the independent sector now by about fourfold. So it was around about 700 million, I think, a few years ago, 450 million about 5 years ago. It's now 1.5 billion. Because the average cost of one independent specialist place is about 5 times what it is in the state sector. Mm. And the difference with independent is they can say no, or they can say this is what it'll cost you. Yeah. So there's a self-destructive element to the whole dynamic, but that's the hostility of our ecosystem. Mm. So, I'm massively underplaying the success of our head teachers and our trust at working in partnership with local authorities. When I talk about financial health, because yes, demand outstrips supply, but the regs also make it very difficult for us to get a fair financial settlement. Yeah. But we have, and that's been really positive. I mean, it's always a really challenging one. So what we have now is we have an increase in parents who are complaining to us, understandably, because they've had their child with us for 5 or 6 years, and suddenly their child who was in a class of 7 or 8 is now in a class of 14 or 15. And why is my child in a class that's double the size? I don't want that. And our view is, we agree. Can't do what about it, though.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Tough. It's tough, but you're doing an amazing job.
But it's I suppose it's just a shift in times, isn't it, as well? Mm-hmm. It's an ever-increasing or demand, and like the resources are just trying to manage. So it's to me, I can't get my head around that. That, like you say, they have got so much power over that.
I think what happened is it was set such a long time ago, and all that's happened is that it's stayed. Yeah. But things are changing and evolving, aren't there? So it isn't evolving in the same.
There's so many emotional needs now, and so different physical and mental needs. It's sort of like, how can you package that up into such a sort of linear thing, I guess? Is they're just looking at it very like, well, that's the benchmark and that's what you're controlling with. But it's
the political challenge I think we've got now with the new government is their manifesto commitment were to not be soft on standards. Now, for me, there's it's not a coincidence. At the same time, we've gone up the PISA rankings, the international rankings in terms of our attainment in English and maths and science. We've also increased demand for specialist provision and alternative provision because there is a cost to having a high-stakes accountability system. There's a huge attrition rate in terms of kids coming into the specialist sector at that year 6, year 7 transition. And I know that primary colleagues would say it's not fair. We're asked to keep kids for a period up until the end of year 6, and then they go into the specialist sector. Why aren't they? And I know secondary, absolutely, yeah. And I know secondary colleagues who are really inclusive would say, we are put under huge pressure around progress rate and attainment, and that is, it's all like the Star Trek needs of the many, needs of the few. Is you've got to get that balance. But who's created that system? Schools haven't. That is a political choice. And the challenge that the new Labour government have got, well, not so new now, is they want to solve the high needs crisis and the push towards specialist provision, whilst at the same time saying, oh, but we're not taking our foot off the pedal in terms of expectations. In fact, we're going up the ante there. Well, what's going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
it's
we
good. We're just moving on
to
to just going to move on to obviously growth now. Quickly, I want to speak a little bit about the merger. Obviously, I read recently that you were looking to merge with another trust. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? And is there going to be a rename, or is it going to be? I don't want to dig too deep, but yeah, just talk to us about what you know.
So, we are excited to be consulting on merger at this moment in time. So, what I'm really pleased and proud of is that this is a process that is being owned by the board of directors, trustees of both organisations. We wouldn't have reached this point if there were outright objection from the two chief executives. Both boards are respectful enough to take our advice. And Gail Brown is the chief exec at Ebor Academies Trust, which is the trust we're consulting with, merging with, and myself. I think we can both clearly see the strategic benefit to creating a larger trust with a footprint across a larger region. So Ebor are based from York upwards up to Scarborough. We're based basically in Doncaster from York downwards. We're almost like a mirror image of one another. So they're 25 schools, 24 primary, mainstream, 1 special. With our growth, 25 schools, 24 special, 1 primary. So, we feel like there's a natural fit there. I think the difference between this and probably what other people have couched as merger is this is 2 trusts where there's a real parity of esteem, where neither trust needs to enter into a negotiation for coming together. The sole driver is the strategic benefit that it can yield, because we've seen other larger trusts grow. And I'm really clear that there isn't a future for smaller mats out there. And multi-academy trusts are the improvement machinery that will support schools that don't meet standards in future. I get the government's view that it needs to be a level playing field with local authorities, find a way to clear the at least 5.1 billion high needs debt and then put the money back that they've lost since 2010. It's not going to happen. I think for both Gail and I, what we can see is that increases options and choices for schools across our locality. So at the risk of sounding like I'm being very greedy, both trusts see that merger would be the first step towards being a viable alternative for other smaller trusts and schools out there in the future in terms of longer term planning. In terms of immediate benefit, it would give all of our schools an opportunity to be part of a larger organisation with greater financial resilience, greater options around things like succession planning across the whole range of services, greater purchasing power. But it's also something that neither trust has to do. So when I say that we're in consultation, we are genuinely eager to hear what our communities have got to say. And I think if there's a big backlash from both communities, there is no drive for us to do this beyond we want to. So at that point, I think we'd take stock and we'd reflect on what we've heard. So far, so good. I think the big thing for it is that, and this is the problem, isn't it? So as a species, we love a flag. We love to be tribal as a species, don't we? That's how we become the apex predator on this planet, because we organise ourselves into little groups and then we put up our flag and that means something to us. And if we think we've evolved beyond that, let's have a look in Europe right now, what's going off on the border with Russia. We haven't moved beyond that. And the Academy Trust system is, okay, dramatic to say that it's like geopolitics, but we've all created our USP. We're all really proud of what we are. We all pretty much describe ourselves in exactly the same way, just using different words. And then suddenly we can't let go of that identity. And there is a commitment from both trusts to respect what we've built and the hard work we've put in and what that means. But I'm really realistic about it. Nexus was a name on a sheet of paper that went to Companies House 10 years ago. It probably means the most and the least to me compared to anybody else in the central team, because I find it odd that people talk about it as a thing. Because it were a name on a sheet of paper. And, I'm a pragmatist. Schools will exist longer than multi-academy trusts. So in terms of what we're taking into merger, and I think Gail Brown at Ebor thinks similarly, these things are temporary. What's long-term, what's permanent, or as permanent as it can be, is the school systems that we support. Yeah. So let's put ego to one side and try and bring that together. Now, we're nowhere near names. There's a lot of steps that we'd have to take. And our target date for merger, I think at the earliest, sensibly, is September 26.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of work that would need to take place between, and there's not much time really between now and then to do that.
Yeah.
No.
And if it needed to be further away and it needed to be longer because we get it right, we're under no pressure to do that. So that's what we do. That's difficult for some people because people like absolutes and certainty. But when a school wants to join us, they don't become an academy until that conversion takes place.
Yeah.
This is just conversion on a much larger scale.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I feel positive about it. I feel excited about it. And I think it's exciting for what this new trust could offer, given the shared values or the mirrored values that EBOR and Nexus seem to espouse and our behaviours. But it's by no means a done deal. And, we're keen to hear what our community's saying. We'll find out early next week.
It's good. Imagine a room, imagine a networking event with all the CEOs in a room. I'd love to just be fly on the wall because they're powering, they must all look round at each other and go,
I think it'd be daggers.
oh,
There'd be
it
a lot.
I don't know if it'd be a nice place to be.
No,
would it?
I think I'm not saying it's going to be toxic.
Oh, with
but
the
I think
flags
it
up
could
like
be
that.
quite-
So,
I
yeah,
think there is a competitive nature.
100%.
It's baked into the system.
It is, yeah.
100%.
It's no matter how much you want not to be, there'll still be that sort of oh well, we do this, you do that, and I don't know. It's I see a lot of peacocking going on. Do you think?
I can imagine.
A lot of ruffling feathers.
I'm going to try and get myself an invite into one of these parties one day. Just walking room and
just having a little microphone.
Honestly, it must be incredible. I love the fact though that it's about building for the, it's that bigger purpose thing, isn't it? The name on the paper is a great point. It is just a name on the paper. It's the bigger purpose of serving.
Absolutely.
Serving.
Well, then, sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry?
But it's like for Nexus then, and for you as a trust, as a we, I won't say you as an individual, but is it trying to look at more inclusivity than what's currently there, or is it just they're doing something that we like, and we can learn from that, or is it purely that you want to branch out further from having an equal share of special and non-special sort of schools, or?
It's probably a little bit of all of those, if I'm honest. And I can't speak for Gail, but I think for EBOR, what they recognise is they service 24 primary schools or primary phase schools. And, we know nationally that we've got falling roles, and there's a real dilemma there. They also operate across county areas where some kids will be travelling, maybe an hour and a half a day to get to the special school.
Wow.
I mean, it's madness. And that's not in a child's interest. Now, what I'm absolutely not saying is that an outcome from this merger, if it happens, would be that every EBOR primary would have a specialist unit in it. However, if you've got a primary school that has got a falling role that is facing affordability challenges and you've got a need for some form of enhanced resource and the space, it's a public asset. One of the things that I get very cross about is the reductive statement, children's money. I'm really clear that we are accountable for public money that is intended to be spent on children, but we don't talk about the NHS in terms of patient money. And yet in education, we have this preoccupation with that's children's money until it suits somebody to be public money. So I think looking at it in the round, it feels like it gives an opportunity for two trusts that are doing very similar things to be able to be stronger together without being beholden to a strategy for what that would operationally look like. Because there is a lot of synergy between what EBOR and Nexus do. And that's where we've come from, and that's why we are where we are at this stage in terms of consultation. Our skill set, demographics, experience could be helpful in terms of some of the contextual issues around primary. Might not be. But I think what it does is it increases our reach collectively to be able to do more for more. And that's therefore that's a choice for others to make. But right now, one of the challenges, one of my biggest frustrations with the departmental view of Nexus Multi Academy Trust is that we are always pigeonholed as a special trust. And there is no such thing as a special trust. I am not a specialist school leader. Our trust has schools in it, 17 of them, that happen to be a majority of special schools. But the trust system is a system that's been built for schools. Yeah. And from our perspective, that's the real strength of coming together with EBOR is perceptions for them are they're a primary trust. And I think Gail would say the same. No, we're a schools trust.
Yeah.
So, again, it feels like bringing that together. Now, there is naturally, on the face of it, that may look like a more inclusive trust. I'm not quite convinced that having special schools in South Yorkshire and a primary school up in Scarborough actually changes anything for either or. But, and I don't think it needs to, because Gail and the EBOR leadership team are really inclusive in their own right. So, there isn't a problem that we're trying to fix. And that's what I didn't take that from your question, but I have to be careful here that, what it does is it creates different opportunities without it being about solving a specific issue.
Yeah. So you're not problem solving that the current issue within each trust at the moment. You're just thinking the future wise.
Yep.
How can we make this? So that's great. I'm revolutionary, really, if you look at it, because the amount of times that you speak to people where, and we've got friends and family who've got children with specialist needs, things like that, and they've got to travel everywhere.
Yeah.
It's sort of just, why can't we just sort of, like you say, just have a better geographical spread of sort of space and need stuff to try and help, not have to have an hour and a half travel. And
seems to me though, doesn't it? It comes from that leadership of people putting their minds together and going, can we fix this problem?
It does.
And that what you've done there with you and Gail is go, we can help more people by actually combining,
fill the gaps and sort of like try and
fair play,
bring it, stitch everything together. So it's exciting
absolute
times.
fair play. Most important question then, as we end, is we're going into 6 weeks holidays. How do you handle kids? What's the situation? Because every parent wants to know, when you get 6 weeks holidays, what do you do with the kids when you've got work? What do you do?
With my own kids?
Yeah.
Well, we're going on holiday on the 24th to Lanzarote
nice.
for a week. And then, do you know what? I just think it's lovely to be at home. We don't. So last night I was showering my little boy, and he said to me, he's never said this to me before, so it's an interesting, really timely question, interesting time to ask. He said, Daddy, why can't you ever do fun things?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, thanks, son. It's better than him commenting on my weight, which is what he usually does. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said,
We've all been there.
You've been on your computer and you haven't been playing on the swings like Mummy has. So I explained, you know what, I've got a job, and if I didn't have this job, we wouldn't have this house, we mightn't have holidays. What would you rather have? And he very quickly bit my hand off at the house and holidays.
Yeah.
But it is nice in that period. So I'm not on school teacher conditions. I've got time off in the summer, but I'll be working in the summer. And to be honest with you, that's great, because more than 2 weeks in my kids, and I'm really ready to get back to work.
Oh, aren't we all? I know. One day I think, and I'm like, right, I've got that meeting to go to. It's been a really, really nice episode. I really appreciate it. And your honesty as well. This is what this podcast is all about, is that we don't always get a chance to speak, to the leaders within schools. It's always, smoke and mirrors and what's going on. But I really appreciate honesty, and so will everyone else watching, because I think it's been really honest. And it doesn't
have to be scathing, does it?
No,
you
it
say
doesn't
honesty.
at all.
Honesty just has to be pure.
As long as you're being honest and doing the right thing, there's not really a lot to hide, is there?
No,
I completely agree, and I think that's part of the challenge. Is I don't understand if your motives, if you're clear on your intent, if you're pretty comfortable with what your motivations are, then what is the barrier to being honest about it?
Yeah.
So it's a comfortable conversation.
Well, it is, isn't it?
It's uncomfortable when you're not clear on your manners.
Oh, absolutely, I know that. But Warren, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, gents.